Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Roberts. I'm a software developer specializing in native mobile development, including Objective-C and Swift for iOS, as well as Java for Android. I also do some web development. I built an application for iOS that's currently running here in the simulator, and it's called the LoL Champion Browser. It's an application that displays champion and champion skin data for the League of Legends game. Before I dive in and show some code and talk about the way I built this, I wanted to start with a brief demo of the application. And even before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the game just so you know what you're looking at here. First and foremost, League of Legends involves playing a game using a champion. There are over 100 different champions you can choose when you play the game, and each champion has unique abilities and skills. This application displays images for each of the available champions in the game, as well as images for all of the skins. Each champion can be played using the default skin or any number of purchased skins. Each champion has anywhere from 5, 6, or 7 different skins, and the game's publisher, Riot Games, frequently updates the game with new champions and new skins. So with that, let me give you a quick demo of the application, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about where I get this data, and then talk also about some of the libraries I used to develop the application and also some approaches or techniques that I used. First of all, as I mentioned, the application displays images for each of the champions. So I'm going to scroll down here and you can kind of get a look at how many different champions are available. And there's quite a few. Like I said, there's about 100 at the time of this recording. There's about 125 different champions. When you click on a champion, here I'll click on Morgana, you'll get some images of the available skins for the champion. And I'm going to scroll through these, and you can see it shows off a lot of the very nice artwork from the Riot Games artists. And I'm just going to scroll through these and show you all of the data that is available. I'm then going to change the orientation, and you'll notice that I'll go to landscape, and I'm showing landscape images for each of the skins. So if I go back to portrait, I show a portrait optimized version of that. So I'm going to scroll and pick another champion just to kind of give you an idea of what we have here. So there's lots of high resolution imagery that I've downloaded and have included as part of this demonstration. One thing I'd like to point out, if you get this application, do not run it unless you're connected to Wi-Fi. I currently download over 1,500 different images, and those images take up over 350 meg of space. So if you're on a data plan and you're not on Wi-Fi, you're going to use a big chunk of your data just getting these initial sets of images. So this is a quick look at the application. There's also some kind of cool ambient magic going on in the background. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. If you want to get the code and follow along, head on over to GitHub to my GitHub page. My GitHub name is Jeff B. Nimble. And when you get there, you'll see that wonderful picture of me along with a couple of repos that I have available. What we're going to do is click on the iOS SQLite repo. I'm currently working on a Swift implementation of this, but at the time of this recording, it's not quite ready. So if you head on over there, I've got a nice little description of the app, There's the code, and then I've taken some time to build out a README. I'm going to lead you through how to get set up for this, and that's going to involve setting up Ruby and getting CocoaPods set up so that you can easily get the dependencies for the application. If you already are familiar with CocoaPods or you already have Ruby set up, you can skip those movies, but for those that don't, hopefully that will give you enough information to get set up. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the goals I had when I built this, and I have them documented here. The first was I wanted to build an application using a best-of-breed tech stack, and those include a dependency injection library that I've been wanting to try out for quite a while called Typhoon. I'm going to have a separate movie on each one of these, at least one movie. Also FMDB, which is a library for interacting with the SQLite database. AF networking. Of course, I believe most everybody that does iOS development probably uses this library or is at least familiar with it. And it's used for making network calls to get data from remote network endpoints. Also wanted to use the Boltz framework, which is an implementation of futures and promises, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not really going to spend much time on Cocoa Lumberjack, but I use that for logging. I threw in SceneKit, which is what I use to do that ambient magic that I spoke of a little bit earlier. And then, of course, I like to write unit tests, so I wanted to use something called Kiwi, and that is a unit testing framework or library that uses a BDD style of unit tests, and I'll go into that as well. On top of that, I wanted to build this application using a specific application architecture, and that is I wanted to persist early and often so that the application could be used offline. As I mentioned, the Riot Games publisher of League of Legends updates the game frequently, and I want the most recent data available. So each time the application launches, I go out and check for an updated version, and if one is found, then I recache all of the data. We'll go into all this in detail, but I wanted to make sure the application was able to be used offline. I also wanted to make sure that it was responsive. And as a mobile developer, one of the things you're always concerned with is staying off of the main thread. And I wanted to play around with a couple of ideas I had for accomplishing that, allowing as much to be done on the background threads as possible. And then, of course, the final thing that I wanted to accomplish here was that I wanted the code to be unit testable. I did include some unit tests. It's not 100% covered, but there's enough in there to give you an idea of how I approached it. The last thing I wanted to show you before we dive in and look at some of the details, look at code and look at some of the libraries that I used, is to show you where I'm getting the data. The data comes from the Riot Games Developer API. They provide an API free of charge to consume all sorts of data about the game. I'm going to go ahead and go to the website, developer.riotgames.com. I'm already logged in, but you can create your own account for free by signing up for a League of Legends account. If you already play the game, you will sign in with your existing game credentials. There is no charge to create an account if you don't have one. Just go ahead and sign up and then come to this site, developer.riotgames.com. I'm going to take a look at the documentation for the API. There's quite a bit available, but I'm using only a small portion of it. I'll let you look here. I'm going to kind of scroll down and let you look at what might be available, but there's all sorts of data available about the game. I happen to be using only a couple of APIs that fall under the LoL Static Data API, and specifically the APIs that I'm using are the Realm API and the Champion API. You can see there's all sorts of other data available here that I'm not using. I just chose to have use a very simple amount of data and build a relatively simple application. The first API is called the Realm API. And you can see here, looking at the documentation, that it basically displays a version. This is what I'm using it for. I want to get the version of the data that's available. Each time Riot publishes an update to the game, which is every few weeks, this API will contain updated information, and I can interrogate the API to see if there's a different version of the data available than I have previously downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the API using the region of NA for North America, and I'm going to execute the request. The data that comes back is in JSON format, and it just shows me everything that's available here. The primary thing that I'm interested in here is the V for version, and that's documented up above. 5.8.1 is the version of the game that's currently running in production. And that's the identifying number that I will use and store locally to determine if I have the latest version of data. The other thing that is important to note here is this CDN value, and this points to a URL where I can get all these images. This is the base URL, and I construct an exact URL out of some other information from the Champion API. Let's take a quick look at the Champion API just so you can see what else I'm getting here. There's all sorts of data available. If you look at this and follow along, I don't need all this. All I'm trying to get is some basic information about the champion, such as the champion's name. There's a brief little description of the champion. There's also a champion ID, and I use all of that to derive all of the champion images and skins when I go retrieve them. I can request this. I can put in all sorts of information here. For example, if I just want 5.8.1, which is the latest one, I want all champion data, and this lets me try the request out to see what the response looks like. You can see when I request all data, it takes a bit because there's all sorts of data, as you'll see here. So it first lists all of the champions available, and then all sorts of information about each champion. So this is where I'm getting my data. As I mentioned, it's free. You can hit it. You'll need a developer key, which you'll get when you log in. It's visible on the main page. Let's go back there just to show you where that is. Here is my developer key. Please use your own. Riot Games does not prefer that each developer have their own unique key. So let's get started.